What happens when one of America's most beloved sitcom stars goes head-to-head with one of daytime television's most outspoken hosts? Well, you're about to find out because the tension in the studio was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Lisa Kudrow, the woman who made us laugh for 10 years as Phoebe Buffay, found herself in the middle of a verbal battlefield that nobody saw coming. And when Joy Behar decided to push just a little too hard, well, let's just say the gloves came off, and what happened next left everyone in the studio completely speechless. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think really happened here, because this confrontation was unlike anything we've seen on daytime television. Now let's get into it. The morning started like any other at the View studio. The panel was assembled, the cameras were rolling, and Lisa Kudrow had joined the ladies to promote her latest project. What should have been a routine celebrity interview quickly turned into something much more intense when the conversation shifted away from entertainment and into much deeper waters. So Lisa, Joy began, leaning forward in her chair with that familiar intensity that regular viewers know all too well. I have to ask you about something that's been bothering me. You've been pretty quiet about some of the major issues affecting working mothers in Hollywood, and I'm wondering if that silence is intentional. Lisa's smile faltered for just a moment, but she maintained her composure. Joy, I wouldn't say I've been silent. I think there are many ways to support causes without making grand public statements about everything. But don't you think, Joy pressed on, her voice gaining momentum, that someone with your platform has a responsibility to speak out? I mean, you made millions playing a character that, let's be honest, wasn't exactly the brightest bulb in the box, and now you have this opportunity to use your voice for something meaningful. The comment about Phoebe hit like a lightning bolt. You could feel the energy in the room shift instantly. The other co-hosts exchanged uncomfortable glances, and Lisa's expression hardened noticeably. Excuse me, Lisa said, her voice steady but with an edge that hadn't been there moments before. I think there might be some confusion here about what my character represented and what my personal values are. Joy wasn't backing down. Look, I'm not trying to attack you personally, but I think it's fair to say that playing ditzy for a decade might have created certain expectations about who you are as a person. Ditzy, Lisa repeated slowly, and you could hear the disbelief in her voice. Joy, I think you might want to reconsider that characterization. Phoebe was eccentric, yes, but she was also incredibly wise, loyal, and had more emotional intelligence than most people give her credit for. The tension was building rapidly now. What had started as a standard interview question was quickly escalating into something much more personal and heated. Come on, Lisa Joy continued, waving her hand dismissively. The character was written to be the comic relief. The quirky one who said random things that made no sense. Are you really going to sit here and tell me that Phoebe was some kind of intellectual powerhouse? Lisa's jaw tightened visibly. What I'm going to tell you, Joy, is that you clearly didn't understand the nuances of the character or the show. If that's your takeaway after 10 seasons, and frankly, I'm surprised that someone who claims to champion women would so casually dismiss a character who represented authenticity and emotional honesty. Oh please, Joy shot back, rolling her eyes dramatically. Let's not pretend that Friends was some groundbreaking feminist manifesto. It was a show about privileged white people in New York City, and your character was there to provide laughs with her weird songs and bizarre observations about life. The other co-hosts were clearly trying to figure out how to intervene, but the conversation was moving too fast and had become too intense for easy interruption. Lisa took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice was controlled, but you could hear the anger underneath. Joy, I'm going to stop you right there. First of all, reducing any character to a simple stereotype shows a fundamental misunderstanding of storytelling and character development. Second, the fact that you're sitting here dismissing the value of bringing joy and laughter to people's lives is honestly pretty disappointing coming from someone in your position. I'm not dismissing anything, Joy replied defensively. I'm just saying that maybe it's time for people who have had the privilege of massive success to step up and use their voices for something more substantial than entertainment. More substantial than entertainment, Lisa repeated, and there was a dangerous quiet in her voice. Now, so you're telling me that the work I've done, the joy I've brought to millions of people, the representation I've provided for women who don't fit into conventional boxes, that's not substantial enough for you? The studio had gone dead quiet, except for the sound of the cameras still rolling. Everyone could sense that this conversation had crossed a line and was heading somewhere no one had expected when Lisa first walked out on that stage. Joy seemed to realize she might have pushed too hard, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. Lisa, all I'm saying is that there's a difference between entertaining people and actually making a difference in the world. And right now, the world needs people with platforms to make a difference. That's when Lisa's composure finally cracked, and what she said next would leave everyone in that studio absolutely stunned. Lisa leaned forward in her chair, her eyes locked directly on Joy, and when she spoke, every word was measured and deliberate. You know what, Joy? I think I need to educate you about something. Making a difference in the world isn't just about standing on soapboxes and lecturing people about politics. Sometimes making a difference means helping someone get through the worst day of their life by giving them 22 minutes of laughter. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Lisa held up her hand, clearly not finished. I have received thousands of letters over the years from people telling me that Phoebe helped them through depression, through loss, through feeling like they didn't belong anywhere. So before you sit there and dismiss what I've contributed to this world, maybe you should consider that your definition of making a difference might be a little narrow. The other co-hosts were exchanging worried looks now. Whoopi was clearly trying to find a moment to jump in and redirect the conversation, but Lisa wasn't done. And another thing, Lisa continued, her voice rising slightly. This constant need to diminish comedy and entertainment as somehow less valuable than political commentary is exactly the kind of thinking that keeps women divided. You're essentially telling me that unless I'm angry and confrontational like you, my contributions don't matter. Joy's face flushed red. Now wait just a minute, Lisa. I never said your contributions don't matter. But we're living in times when celebrities have a moral obligation to speak out about injustice. Moral obligation, Lisa repeated incredulously. According to who? According to you. Joy, do you realize how condescending you sound right now? You're literally telling me that my choice to focus on my craft and bring positivity into the world, instead of engaging in constant political warfare, makes me somehow morally deficient. That's not what I said, Joy protested, but Lisa was on a roll. Now, actually, that's exactly what you said. You started this conversation by suggesting that my silence on certain issues is intentional, as if my choice to not turn every public appearance into a political statement is somehow a character flaw. Then you dismissed my most famous role as playing someone who wasn't the brightest bulb, completely missing the point that Phoebe was actually the most emotionally intelligent character on the show. Sunny Hostin finally tried to intervene. Ladies, maybe we should take a step back here, and ... but Joy cut her off. No, I want to address this. Lisa, I think you're being overly sensitive about what was clearly meant as a lighthearted comment about your character. Lisa laughed, but there was no humor in it. Joy, you just spent the last 5 minutes telling me that my life's work isn't substantial enough and that I have some kind of moral failing because I don't use my platform the way you think I should. How exactly is that lighthearted? Because, Joy said, gesturing dramatically, we're having a conversation about real issues here, about responsibility and using your influence for good. And instead of engaging with that conversation, you're getting defensive about a fictional character you played 20 years ago. The insult hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Lisa went completely still, and when she spoke, her voice was dangerously quiet. 20 years ago, she said slowly. Joy, do you realize that Friends ended in 2004? Do you understand that this show has continued to impact people's lives every single day since then? Do you grasp that there are teenagers today who are discovering these characters for the first time and finding comfort and joy in them? Joy waved her hand dismissively again. Lisa, come on, it's a sitcom about attractive people with unrealistic problems. Let's not pretend it's changing the world. That was the moment when Lisa Kudrow, the woman who had spent decades being gracious in interviews and kind to fans, finally reached her breaking point. You know what, Joy? I'm done. I'm absolutely done with this conversation. You invited me here to talk about my current projects, and instead, you've spent this entire time belittling my past work, questioning my moral character, and dismissing the impact that bringing joy into people's lives can have. The studio was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every moment of what was quickly becoming daytime television history. Lisa Whoopi finally managed to interject. I think maybe we all got a little heated here, ... But Lisa wasn't listening to Whoopi. Her focus was entirely on Joy. Now, no Whoopi, we didn't all get heated. Joy got judgmental, condescending, and frankly, cruel. And I don't have to sit here and take it. Joy leaned back in her chair, clearly realizing that things had gone too far. But her pride wouldn't let her back down completely. Lisa, I think you're overreacting to what was meant to be a substantive discussion about celebrity responsibility. Overreacting, Lisa repeated, and she actually smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. Joy, let me tell you what overreacting would be. Overreacting would be me pointing out that you've built an entire career on being controversial and confrontational, often at the expense of your guest's dignity. Overreacting would be me mentioning that your idea of substantive discussion seems to involve attacking people's life choices until they get upset enough to create good television. The accusation hit like a thunderbolt. Joy's mouth fell open, and for the first time in the entire conversation, she seemed genuinely speechless. Lisa stood up slowly, and every eye in the studio was on her. But I'm not going to overreact, Joy. I'm just going to leave, because I don't have to sit here and be insulted by someone who clearly has no understanding of what I've actually contributed to this world. She began removing her microphone, and that's when Joy finally found her voice again. But what she said next would be the final straw that sent Lisa Kudrow walking right off that stage. As Lisa fumbled with her microphone clip, Joy's voice cut through the stunned silence like a knife. "Oh, so now you're going to storm off like a prima donna because someone asked you some tough questions. This is exactly the kind of privileged behavior I'm talking about." Lisa froze. Her hand was still on the microphone, but she slowly turned back to face Joy, and the look in her eyes was something none of the other co-hosts had ever seen before. "Prima donna," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper, but somehow carrying to every corner of the studio. "You just called me a prima donna for refusing to sit here, while you systematically tear down everything I've worked for my entire career." Joy realized immediately that she had made a critical error, but she was in too deep to stop now. "Lisa, I didn't mean ... No," Lisa said, her voice growing stronger. "You know exactly what you meant. You meant that I should sit here quietly, while you insult my intelligence, dismiss my work, question my values, and belittle the joy I've brought into millions of people's lives. And when I finally stand up for myself, I'm a prima donna." The other co-hosts were frantically looking at each other and then at their producers off camera, clearly hoping someone would step in and stop this train wreck, but everyone seemed frozen by the intensity of what was unfolding. "Joy," Lisa continued, "do you want to know what a prima donna actually is? A prima donna is someone who thinks their opinion is so important that they can tear down a guest on national television and then act surprised when that guest refuses to be their punching bag." Joy's face was getting redder by the second. "Lisa, you're twisting my words. All I did was ask you about your platform and your responsibility." "Your responsibility," Lisa interrupted, and she actually laughed out loud. "Joy, let me tell you about responsibility. My responsibility was to show up here today to promote a project that employs dozens of people whose jobs depend on its success. My responsibility was to be professional and gracious to you and your audience. But your responsibility as a host was to treat your guest with basic respect, and you failed spectacularly." The studio audience, which had been silent throughout this entire exchange, was now completely riveted. You could feel the energy in the room shifting as people began to realize they were witnessing something unprecedented. Sarah N. finally found her voice. "Maybe we should all just take a breath here, and ... No, Sarah," Lisa said, turning to address her directly. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I'm not going to take a breath and pretend this is normal. What happened here today is not normal. What Joy did to me is not acceptable, and I'm not going to enable it by playing along with some fake reconciliation for the cameras." Joy stood up abruptly, clearly agitated. "Lisa, you are being completely unreasonable. This is how these conversations go. We ask tough questions, we have debates, we challenge each other. That's what this show is about." Lisa stared at her for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was deadly calm. "Joy, this wasn't a debate. This wasn't a challenging conversation. This was a systematic attempt to humiliate me on national television. You questioned my intelligence. You dismissed my career. You called me morally deficient. And then, when I finally defended myself, you called me a prima donna. That's not journalism. Joy, that's bullying." The word bullying hung in the air like an accusation that couldn't be taken back. Joy's expression changed completely, and for a moment, she looked genuinely shaken. "I am not a bully," Joy said, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. "Then explain to me," Lisa said, "what you call it when someone with a platform uses that platform to tear down someone else's life's work in front of millions of people. What do you call it when someone dismisses another person's contributions to the world as not substantial enough? What do you call it when someone sits in judgment of how another person chooses to use their voice?" Joy opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time in the entire confrontation, she seemed to have no response. Lisa picked up her purse from beside her chair and slung it over her shoulder. "You know what the saddest part about this is, Joy? I actually used to respect you. I thought you were someone who stood up for women, who fought for what was right, but what you did here today wasn't fighting for anything. It was just cruel." Whoopi finally managed to speak up. "Lisa, please don't leave like this. We can work this out." Lisa turned to Whoopi with genuine sadness in her eyes. "Whoopi, I have nothing but respect for you and this show, but I can't work this out. Joy made it very clear what she thinks of me and my work, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that's okay just to make good television." Joy finally found her voice again, but what came out was desperate and defensive. "Lisa, you're making this into something it's not. I was trying to have a meaningful conversation about important issues." Lisa stopped walking and turned back, one final time. "Joy, if your idea of a meaningful conversation involves attacking your guest's character, intelligence, and life choices, then maybe you need to reconsider what meaningful actually means." She paused at the edge of the set, and what she said next would become the most quoted moment from this entire explosive confrontation. "You know, Joy," Lisa said, her voice carrying across the silent studio with crystalline clarity, You spent this entire conversation telling me that I need to use my platform to make a difference in the world. Well, congratulations. You just gave me the perfect opportunity to show people exactly what standing up for yourself looks like. With that, Lisa Kudrow walked off the set of The View, leaving behind one of the most jaw-dropping moments in daytime television history. The silence that followed was deafening. Joy stood frozen at her seat, her face cycling through emotions from anger to confusion to what looked like the first glimmers of regret. Whoopi was shaking her head slowly, clearly processing what had just happened. Sarah and Sunny looked like they had just witnessed a car accident, unable to look away but horrified by what they had seen. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of the aftermath. Joy finally sank back into her chair, and when she spoke, her voice was barely audible. I never meant for it to go that far. Whoopi turned to her with an expression that was part disappointment, part disbelief. Joy, what were you thinking? Lisa came here to talk about her new project, and you turned it into an interrogation about her moral character. I was trying to have a substantive conversation, Joy said weakly, but even she seemed to realize how hollow that sounded after everything that had just transpired. Substantive, Sarah repeated quietly, and there was something in her tone that suggested she wasn't buying it either. Joy, you questioned her intelligence, dismissed her career as not substantial enough, and then called her a prima donna when she stood up for herself. How is that substantive? The studio audience was still completely silent, as if they were afraid that making any noise might somehow make the situation even worse. The producers were clearly scrambling behind the scenes, trying to figure out how to handle what was undoubtedly going to become a major news story. Sunny finally spoke up, her voice careful and measured. I think we all need to acknowledge that what just happened here went way beyond normal interview boundaries. Lisa Kudrow is a respected actress who came here as our guest, and she deserved better than what she received. Joy looked around the table at her co-hosts, and for the first time, seemed to realize that she had lost them completely. Are you all seriously taking her side on this? Joy, Whoopi said firmly, there are no sides here. There's just what happened, and what happened was wrong. You pushed and pushed until you broke something that didn't need to be broken. The weight of Whoopi's words seemed to hit Joy like a physical blow. She looked out at the audience, then back at her co-hosts, and finally down at her hands folded on the table in front of her. I thought, Joy said slowly, I thought I was holding her accountable. I thought I was asking the hard questions that needed to be asked. About what Sarah asked, and there was genuine confusion in her voice. Joy, she's an actress, promoting a project. She's not a politician running for office. She's not a CEO accused of wrongdoing. She's someone who has brought joy and laughter into people's lives for decades. And you treated her like she was on trial for some terrible crime. The reality of what had happened was starting to sink in around the table. This wasn't just a heated discussion that had gotten out of hand. This was a complete breakdown of the basic respect and courtesy that guests deserve when they come on television. Whoopi looked directly into the camera, and when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had been in this business long enough to know when lines have been crossed. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll try to make sense of what just happened here. And we owe Lisa Kudrow a sincere apology for how this interview went completely off the rails. As the show cut to commercial, Joy remained seated at the table, staring at the spot where Lisa had been sitting just minutes before. The other co-hosts got up and walked away, leaving Joy alone with the weight of what she had done. The studio audience began to murmur among themselves, processing what they had just witnessed. Some were pulling out their phones, already posting about the confrontation on social media. Others sat in stunned silence, still trying to understand how a routine celebrity interview had transformed into such a devastating public confrontation. When the cameras stopped rolling, Joy finally looked up, and what she saw was a studio full of people looking at her with a mixture of disappointment and disbelief. The crew members who had worked with her for years were shaking their heads. The producers were huddled in intense conversation, clearly trying to figure out how to handle the inevitable fallout. But perhaps the most telling moment came when one of the younger production assistants approached Joy hesitantly. Ms. Behar, she said quietly, Lisa Kudrow has been my favorite actress since I was a little girl. Friends helped me through some really tough times growing up. I just wanted you to know that what she said about making a difference by bringing joy into people's lives, that really resonated with me. Joy looked at the young woman and saw her own words reflected back at her through the eyes of someone who had been genuinely hurt by what had happened. For the first time since the confrontation began, Joy seemed to truly understand the impact of what she had done. The assistant walked away, leaving Joy alone at the table with the realization that in her quest to create what she thought was meaningful television, she had instead created something that would be remembered for all the wrong reasons. Lisa Kudrow's final words echoed in the empty studio. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful way to make a difference is simply to stand up for yourself when someone tries to tear you down. And there you have it, the complete story of how Lisa Kudrow walked off the View after one of the most intense confrontations in daytime television history. What started as a routine promotional interview became a masterclass in standing up for yourself and refusing to be diminished by someone else's need to create controversy. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest content. And tell us in the comments, do you think Lisa was right to walk off? Or should she have stayed and tried to work things out with Joy? Let us know what you think happened next.